The winter 2023 anime season has been a little slow compared to the absolutely stacked last few seasons. So if you're like me, you may be taking a look back at some things that you might have missed from previous seasons. There's one show that I think some people have finally been noticing recently as an underappreciated hidden gem, partially just because it was on Disney Plus for some reason. Summertime Render. I see it listed as Summertime Rendering in a lot of places, but the katakana on the cover says render, so it's render to me, not rendering. I'm dying on this hill. I'll try to avoid too many spoilers beyond the first episode or two, so if you want to check it out, definitely do. On the rural island of Hitogashima, a fictionalized version of the real island Tomogashima, there's an old folk legend called the Shadow Sickness. Someone afflicted with the shadow sickness will start to see their shadow, a doppelganger that looks exactly like them, and eventually be killed and replaced by it. Shinpei is just a small town boy who had moved to Tokyo to pursue his career. In the first episode, we find him returning to his small island hometown for the funeral of his childhood friend slash sort of sister.
Both a close childhood friend and a sister to me.
Ushio. It's complicated. After Shinpei's friend So tells him that there's evidence that Ushio's death may have actually been a murder, the true nature of the shadow sickness very slowly starts to come into view, calling into question the circumstances of not just Ushio's death, but also the deaths of Shinpei's parents back when he was a kid. But before long, Shinpei knows too much and is killed, rather gruesome. Luckily, this is that type of anime, but unlike Groundhog Day, All You Need Is Kill / Edge of Tomorrow, ReZero, The Tatami Galaxy, Steins Gate Zero, and probably several more that I'm not thinking of, the moment that Shinpei loops back to moves forward a little bit each time he dies, meaning that he and his ragtag group of confidants need to continue to make forward progress towards surviving and uncovering the secrets of the island with each and every loop, or else Shinpei will fall into a time vortex, actually die for real. I don't know, something like that. It'll be bad. While the time loop trope can easily make it feel like there are no stakes, this really keeps the story moving forward. Now, a little over a year before this anime came out, I picked up the manga on a whim and started reading it as it was being released, not expecting a whole lot. And while it has its flaws, I was completely hooked. This is a non-stop roller coaster that knows how to deliver endless suspense with twist after twist after twist. Around the middle, it really starts to feel like every other chapter there would be a massive revelation that completely recontextualizes your understanding of the story up until that point. One small aspect that I found really charming is the importance of the location. The author Yasunori Tanaka is from Wakayama Prefecture, where Tomogashima is located. I don't think on the actual island, I'm not sure, but at least nearby. So he seems to be pretty familiar with it. And there's a real sense of place here. He even includes several real locations from the island, which are carried over to the anime, and will often end a chapter with a photograph from the real island. And the anime ending is a live action shot of the real island from a boat. Just a nice little element that I think gives the story personality and stops it from feeling too generic. Now, it's not perfect. What I said earlier about the non-stop twists may sound unsustainable, and in a sense it is. There are a whole lot of plot holes, and it starts to trip over itself a bit towards the end, and some of the sci-fi explanations are just long and straight up confusing at times. It's pretty tropey, and there's a whole lot of anime bullshit going on here that's completely unnecessary, and if anything, actually interferes with the tone of the story. Yes, she does have to be wearing a swimsuit the entire time because of sci-fi, don't worry about it. And unfortunately, that sense of place also means that all the characters talk in a hillbilly accent, which is translated in English as replacing you with ya and your with your in every single sentence, which can get very unrealistic and distracting. Surely that's something that the anime can improve on.
Son of a bitch!
But none of these flaws stop it from being a truly entertaining story. The manga wasn't particularly popular at the time, at least in English, so when it finished with an announcement of an upcoming anime adaptation, I was shaking uncontrollably with anticipation that I would, for the first time, get to be that hipster that says, yeah, it's not bad, but I read the manga before the anime was announced, and it really doesn't do it justice. You should just read the manga. And then when it was announced that this dark and grounded action thriller would be done by OLM, the Pokemon studio, Odd Taxi notwithstanding, my oscillations only intensified. I watched it as it came out, and believe me, I would have made this video then, but I didn't have a YouTube channel at the time. But you know what? The anime does do it justice. It's a very faithful adaptation that cuts almost nothing and actually makes a few improvements. There are some trade-offs, of course. The gore is slightly turned down, if only slightly. Tanaka does an amazing job with facial expressions in his illustrations, which the anime sometimes does justice, but at other times they can come out feeling a little too, for lack of a better word, cartoonish when put to animation. Some of the grandeur and horror of these detailed full-page spreads is also lost in the transition to animation. I don't think there's any way around that, though. That's just the nature of the medium. On the other hand, the transition to anime massively elevates the action scenes. While reading the manga, I started to get a little fatigued in the last third of the story because it gets much more action-heavy, and with a series of supposedly final battles, it started to become unclear when the final resolution would actually come, and the increasingly convoluted plot was held up mostly by good but not amazing action scenes. Well, in the anime, these action scenes become a selling point all of their own, in addition to the intrigue and suspense. Look at how this action scene from the manga is elevated by the animation. First of all, they add this little transition from the parallel scene that's going on outside at the same time. I love the way this one little shot gives a sense of geography and lets us know that both these fights are happening at the same time. Tanaka does a great job of choreographing this motion and illustrating each step of Hizuru's backflip. And the animated version is incredibly similar, but by replacing these speed lines in the background with a grounded 3D environment and turning the camera motion into a smooth circle, it becomes much easier to understand what's happening here, not to mention the sheer animation quality. In general, the Sakuga in this show was just way beyond what I was expecting. Finally, I mentioned earlier that some of the sci-fi concept explanations start to get a little convoluted and confusing in the second half. Well, I'm not sure if it was just because it was my second time experiencing the story, but I found that clarity to actually be improved in the anime as well. Alright, I think I've told you all you need to know. Now get out there, little slugger, and watch some dang cartoons. I know you can do it. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this.